There are few films in existence that have been able to seamlessly blend the qualities of blockbuster action epics with profoundly artistic sensibilities that result in both widespread commercial success and critical praise and awards. None better, however, it seems, than the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Released from 2001 to 2003, these films seem to be an incredible strike of lightning in a bottle that on all terms might be impossible to recreate, as we kinda have seen evidence of. There are films that may have come close in the years behind and before it, but in my opinion, there's absolutely nothing to do it quite so well. This is my all-time favorite film trilogy, more than Spider-Man, more than Toy Story, more than The Dark Knight, more than even the original Star Wars films. It's finally time for me to create a review of these films that have inspired so much in my love of film, of musical score, of fantasy worlds, and analyzing why these films in particular strike a chord with me and so many other people. It all started in 2001 when The Fellowship of the Ring was released. I was naturally too young to see it in theaters, but I saw it on video, and even though it was a bit much for me as a kid, by the time I was in my tweens to early teens, I began to fully appreciate how truly great these films were. This is definitely a more complex fantasy story that applies more directly to adults than The Hobbit does. To prepare for my review, I watched the extended edition instead of the original cut. If you've never seen these films, you need to watch the original cuts first. The extended editions are very daunting. The versions released in the theaters are more streamlined with a much faster pace, but after you've accustomed yourself to the world and the characters, the extended editions are actually kind of better, at least for my watching. Nothing added was absolutely essential, but these longer versions have more overall space for development. You can get to know all of these characters more in depth, and the world is explained and rendered in so much more detail. But these moments do drag unless you already have the love obtained from the theatrical cuts. This was the first big Hollywood trilogy to be filmed all at one time. It was an extremely daunting task, but all you have to do is look at the world that was created to appreciate how entirely they succeed in it. World building is hard. You may think that fantasy is easy to immerse oneself into, seeing that this is the day of shows like Game of Thrones, but when Lord of the Rings was first released, it didn't really have much to back it up in terms of epic fantasy. I mean, I guess you had Dungeons and Dragons starring Jeremy Irons, but I doubt anyone's going to argue that impressed upon anyone the possibilities of high fantasy. Let the blood rain from the sky! Even great fantasy films released beforehand never really reached this scale. Harry Potter had just released, but that was propped up by taking place in more modern times, being set distinctly in our world, in a familiar setting of a school. But Middle-earth is an entirely new playing field. This was a map that had to be established to many first-time viewers. Lord of the Rings, the novel, hit its peak popularity in the 60s, probably because of all the weed references. But in terms of the 2001 audiences, people had maybe read The Hobbit as a kid, but that was the extent of the mass knowledge on Tolkien's work, including many of the actors cast in the roles. Peter Jackson took on the immense task of translating this world to screen, and I think he killed it. Starting off with the brilliant idea to film these movies in New Zealand. It's such a diverse landscape that legitimately looks like a foreign fantasy world. The pre-production work took a long time to develop, and it shows. So much conceptual art, building immense sets of genuine beauty, and scouting locations to blend them into, all pays off magnificently into the final product. In Fellowship alone, the diversity of landscapes on eye makes sure this world is fully realized and all the audiences can step into it and fully adore all that was established. The Shire looks absolutely perfect. The warm colors, the greens instantly make you feel at home, just as the hobbits who are about to venture out where the warmth of home is so far behind. Only spot where we feel anywhere close to home again is the comfortable sanctuary of Rivendell. It's contrasting by the rainy town of Bree or the cold, intense caves of Moria. The design of these places shine through in every second that the characters venture through them. The cinematography by Andrew Lesnie is also fantastic, setting the right mood for every moment and making each scene beautiful in its own way. But I think the main quality of these films that completely sells the world it creates is the score by Howard Shore. It captures so much feeling and builds up themes that drive the viewer towards intense emotions in all the right places. The ring theme is so foreboding and effective, it's what makes you buy that a tiny golden object could spell out doom for the world. The Fellowship theme is possibly the most badass theme ever committed to film. Whenever the orchestra explodes it into your eardrums, you immediately get the impression shit is about to go down. The Shire theme is captured with instruments that send a wholesome feeling of home. The main reason these rolling green hills have a profound impact on me is the theme that was established for them. And whenever it's incorporated later into the films, it always serves to establish motivation and character for these hobbits. In short, I think this trilogy of films is possibly the perfect adaptation of a source ever. I'm not basing that opinion on how faithful it is. It is close, but every single change made in these films feels like it's exactly engineered for the sake of better pacing, structure, or emotional impact. In Fellowship alone, we skip past huge sections of the book, which, in terms of a leisurely read, are perfectly fine, but would kill the momentum of a movie. Films can have periods where you can relax, but Tolkien's writing is so dense that excising certain parts was completely necessary. Imagine the hobbits on the run from the Black Rider, but in the movie they stop at Tom Bombadil's house for 20 minutes, killing the tension of light debris. I love the book an immense amount. It's possibly one of my favorites of all time, but it stands as a fundamental example of how page-to-screen accuracy isn't always the right move. The screenplay for Fellowship of the Ring is a masterpiece of introducing people to a strange new world and getting them to legitimately care about the characters within it, in a way that feels unique to the format of cinema. The story for this film definitely starts off different, as the prologue deals extensively with a lot of stuff that was exposition told to characters in the novel, and the book begins immediately at Bilbo's party. For a first view into Middle-earth, it's creepy, atmospheric, and intensely effective. Viewers can completely feel the effect of the threat to come by the setup placed forth here. Sauron being visualized as a huge hulking person has received criticism, but I always saw that more as a personification of him to go forth onto the battlefield as opposed to the literal incarnation of him. The fact that we never actually see Sauron's face or the characters meet him at any time in the trilogy is actually pretty effective. He's a villain defined almost entirely by his emissaries and armies. After this huge epic history of the tale about to unfold, we swing back to the comfort of the Shire, to Bilbo Baggins' party. Common audiences most likely encounter with Middle-earth was probably The Hobbit, so it was important that the most recognizable character was done right. And Ian Holm, who played Frodo in the 1981 BBC radio drama of Lord of the Rings, brings him to life perfectly. You get a sense of the cunning adventurer from the Hobbit story, but there's a genuine feeling of sadness about the weight that the ring has placed down upon him all the years he's been its bearer.
I'm very selfish, you know. Yes, I am. Very selfish. I don't know why I took you in after your mother and father died, but it wasn't out of charity. I think it was because of all my numerous relations. You were the one Baggins that showed real spirit.
The film continues to show its competency for storying after this sequence as we get to follow Gandalf to Isengard. And the novel was talked about at the Council of Elrond, but Jackson established himself as the king of showing, not telling. Wherever possible in these movies, instead of having characters just talk about certain events, he foregoes ahead and just shows them happening. This man was not lazy. He was passionate about everything he put into these movies. Well, back in the early 2000s at least. Christopher Lee as Saruman is amazing. He's such a badass, commanding presence, and out of his diverse filmography, this is probably my favorite role of his. He represents the actual face of Sauron's plot to counter Middle-earth, and he does a great job of it. When he and Gandalf have a wizard battle, even though he's old, he radiates a presence that makes you feel his threat.
The chance of aiding me willingly, but you have elected the way of pain.
The first half of the driving adventure is pretty effective, with Frodo's quest with the other four hobbits and escaping from the Ringwraiths. The sound design and appearance of these villains is so intensely cool. You really begin to feel the hobbits are helpless against these odds. That is, until Strider, played by Viggo Mortensen, steps into the picture. After Frodo is stabbed by a Morgul blade, Arwen actually given a more meaty role here than in the source material. The novel's version of Flight to the Ford may have been demonstrated Frodo as being a little more badass and independent as he undertook the chase by himself, but with him having to have Arwen's assist actually adds to the tension of the scene. Plus, the chase scene, where the Nazgul gradually count up until all 9 are after her, is amazing. Even if the Ringwraiths leave the film halfway through as an antagonist thanks to Elrond's water powers, it was extremely effective as a force pushing the protagonist towards the midpoint of his journey. Or more like the 6th point. Honestly, the interesting thing about the extended editions is that disc 1 ends here at the temporary defeat of the Ring Wraiths, so these almost work as regular 2-hour, 2.5-hour films. In my opinion, even though the first half is pretty great, it's the second half where things get amazing. Seriously, the Council of Elrond is a great scene that even further emphasizes the stakes of the journey ahead. It shows the destructive power that the ring can hold with a scene where everyone is arguing over it.
I will take the ring to Mordor.
Frodo stepping up and taking on the important responsibility of the ring is immensely important to his character. I like how Frodo is someone who shows his strength through his choices and his inner will as opposed to being an outward action hero. I honestly think Elijah Wood is seriously underrated in these films. All of the weight that smashes down upon him throughout the trilogy, and the pain it causes him are perfectly captured by this actor. The films give him more to do in terms of problem solving, such as helping Gandalf solve the Moria door. I'm just really tired of people complaining how completely ineffectual they think Frodo is. He's a different kind of protagonist, one where his greatest battle is not visual, but it's being constantly fought throughout the trilogy within himself. After we leave Rivendell,
so be it. You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right. Where are we going?
we get a scene that perfectly establishes how much this film is an absolute masterpiece. A steady shot of each character walking past a rock is probably one of the most iconic and amazing scenes in cinema. I know we're back to Howard Shore here, but man, I can't overstate how much he adds to these movies. Now we get to the Moria sequence, which in my opinion is a perfect execution of a slow burn that leads into a finale with immense effect. The conversation between Gandalf and Frodo in the darkness of the mines is another scene that could be my favorite. There's so many to pick in this movie. Ian McKellen was the only actor ever nominated for his work in the Rings trilogy, and even though there's plenty who also deserved acclaim, you just really need to watch this speech with that magnificent dialogue, and wonder at a master of the acting craft at work.
I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
McKellen was able to demonstrate everything important about the character of Gandalf, from the kind, lovable old man to the badass wizard who knows exactly how to deal with most situations. After the slow bit walking through the atmospheric mines, Pippin drops a bunch of stuff down a well, and then the rest of the Moria sequence is non-stop action and tension, and it's absolutely fantastic. The Fellowship theme is used twice more in this extensive set piece. I don't think I can ever get tired of hearing it. I adore the moment with the crumbling stairs because it's just purely there for the purpose of ramping up the intensity of the moment. And then, just like 20 minutes since the last iconic, forever memorable moment, we get this. If there's another moment in film to express such pure badassery and amazing acting, I don't know what else you could pick. Gandalf's sacrifice is such an amazing moment, and the vocal music that plays as the Fellowship grieves is unforgettable. I love how even in this sad moment, we still have a feeling of the stakes that were only briefly interrupted by the escape.
Give them a moment, for pity's sake!
By nightfall, these hills will be swarming with orcs. We must reach the woods of Lothlorien.
We then venture into the elf city Lothlorien, which after the fast-paced intensity of Moria is an appropriate breather before the finale. We get to meet Cate Blanchett as Galadriel, who even with a small role leaves a big impact. Now I really want to talk about Boromir, as he's the most uniquely human and possibly the most complex character in the movie. Everyone else has some magical shimmer or the like that makes them feel completely a fantasy character, but Boromir, He's one of us, a simple, fallible human that even though his intentions are noble, his flaws turn against him and make him so corrupted. Sean Bean is amazing in this movie, and his ultimate sacrifice, fighting against multiple arrows to rescue the hobbits, is the perfect emotional moment to end the film. After all that you've seen the characters go through, when they split up into their three factions, Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, and then Merry and Pippin with the orcs, and then finally Frodo and Sam, you legit feel something. That's why making this first movie so long is needed. If this was your regular 2-hour quick-paced film, there would be no time at all to attach to these characters within the story you would have to get through. But that extra hour was an hour of character for pretty much each of them, and even more with the extended edition.
I made a promise, Mr. Frodo. A promise. Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee. And I don't mean to. I don't mean to.
When Shore's sweeping themes to bring the story to a close begin to play, the breaking of the Fellowship is so effectively executed that it makes me tear up a bit. Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is easily one of the greatest films ever made. The passion, the creativity, the talent, everything poured into this film is magnificent. It gets my special, made-up score for the movies that hit me right in the feels. 11 out of 10. And the best thing about this film that I haven't even mentioned yet is there's 2 more of them to come. I'll be hitting a few of those reviews as soon as I possibly can, as soon as I'm satisfied with the scripts and editing, and in the meantime you can watch the rest of my Middle-earth series that I've been working on. The playlist will pop up in the end card. Thank you so much for watching. Please share this video if you think it's worth it, and please subscribe to my channel if you feel sufficiently inclined.